Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Daniel chapter 6, and we're coming to the halfway point of Daniel. The first 6 chapters gives us sort of a historical narrative of Daniel's life as he, a young lad, a teenager, is deported from his homeland Israel to Babylon, where he served the rest of his life, and so we have seen he's lived an extraordinary life. He was actually promoted, actually the second ruler, and then he's now older. We're going to see that he's older, much older. He's an older man, and so let's get to it. And as we can see in our image right here, he is now in the second kingdom, which is the Persian kingdom, the breast of silver and gold. I'll get more into this probably in the next study, as we again it gets more into the interpretation. The prophecies he receives will be the interpretation of this dream in greater detail. So let's get to it. But this is going to be the famous Daniel in the lion's den. Okay. Now in chapter 5, we go back to, in chapter 5, verse 30, it says that very night Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed. Now this is kind of astounding. Remember, they had this great party going on, and 1,000 of his nobles, wives, and concubines, and all that. I did take note that it was his wives and concubines all at the same party, but that's how they did it back then. That's how they lived. And then, so Belshazzar brings out the gold vessels of the temple, from the temple that from Solomon's temple, and that they were taken when then the temple was destroyed, and then brought to Babylon. So God doesn't care about the utensils, okay? And you could kind of see this. God doesn't care about the temples. I mean, he doesn't care. He didn't care about the vessels. I'm sorry, the vessels, because he allowed them to be taken. He allowed them to be, you know, my word here, not plotted, plunged. Right? That's not the word I'm looking at either. But they were taken, right? But he was dealing with Belshazzar's attitude. So in other words, why did he take those vessels? In other words, if you want, and then his statement against God to say, I'm going to take these vessels, and kind of, thumb his nose up at God. God says, well, not so good news for you. And that's why it says right here, the very night he was killed. So after Daniel had given this, remember, as they were drinking the gold, this hand appears and writes this message to them. Men, tinkle, men, tinkle, perish, meaning that the days of your kingdom have been numbered and have brought to an end. And this is literally this night. He says, you have been weighing the balance and have found deficient. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And then it says, this night this happens to him. So he's killed this night. The Medes and Persians invaded Babylon that night and killed him. So, okay. Verse chapter 6. Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, stationed throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel. these satraps would be accountable to them so that the king would not be defrauded. Now, this is kind of interesting here because now Daniel's living into a different kingdom. And imagine yourself being under a different management. In my work experience, I think a lot of us have probably been through that. I've been through that. When you go from one management to another, and the new management come in. They got they're all their different ways and all of that. So now Daniel, he's lived through now. He's in an entirely different kingdom. And then he says, first three, Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and the satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit. So the king planned to set him over the whole realm. Now, remember, this already happened to him, but under Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 4, the administrators and satraps therefore kept trying to find a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom, but they could not find no charge or corruption, for he was a trustworthy and had no negligence or corruption was found in him. And, let me just say this. Sometimes you're going to have to deal with that. Jealousy, sparked on by sinful people. And you remember the people who hated Daniel under Nebuchadnezzar, even though he saved their lives. But the wisdom that God had given him, the ability to interpret dreams, saved their lives. Okay? But again, sinful people. We're going to have to, and sometimes we will deal with sinful people and their ploys and their plots. So verse 5, he says, Then these men said, we will never find any charge against this Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. So in other words, he's a straight arrow. He's living right. He's doing right. We're not going to get him that way. So the administrators, by the way, and this is not to say that they're corrupt, they're evil, right? But okay. So the administrators and the satraps went together to the king and said to him, May King Darius live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, and the prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce it either for 30 days. Anyone who petitions any god or man except you, the king, will be thrown into the lion's den. Therefore, your majesty establish the edict and sign the document so that, as a law of the Medes and Persians, it is irrevocable and cannot be changed. So King Darius signed the documents. Now, here we see sometimes how men can be so stupid. So first and foremost, you have this law where you set up, and the way they did is that once the king issued the law, you can't reverse it. So then you have the fact that the kings then would set up these stupid laws, and this is one of them. In other words, notice how they used the king's pride. Hey, king, let's set a law up that no one can pray to you, only you. Now, it's amazing that they thought so highly of Daniel that they would go, all we need is 30 days, right? Not a year, not 2 years, just 30 days, and knew that he would never, ever, ever, he's going to break this law. They thought that highly of Daniel's integrity. And then you see the silliness of the king who signs the edict. Like, why am I signing this? Why do I need to sign this, right? He doesn't question, why do I need to sign this? So verse 10 says, when Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went to his house. The windows in his upper rooms opened towards Jerusalem. And 3 times a day he got down on his knees, prayed, and gave thanks to God, just as he had done before. Now, before I get into the story, because obviously this is a fantastic story, but obviously, what does this sound like here? Islam. How Islam prays 5 times a day. That wherever Muslims are in the world, they will face Mecca and they will pray 5 times a day. Where do you think they got this from? Right here, the Bible. Okay. And so Daniel would do this as he is deported, but notice he would pray towards Jerusalem 3 times a day. Now, you can also see that he has some kind of privilege, because notice he had his windows, his upper room, his kind of place where he kind of was able to situate it where the windows were facing towards Jerusalem. That's a little privilege there he was able to take advantage of, and he would pray. So verse 11, these men went as a group and found Daniel petitioning and imploring his God. So they knew it. They're like, okay, we got him, because they knew that, right? And by the way, Daniel made it a point that he wasn't going to hide it. Verse 12, so they approached the king and asked him about the edict. Didn't you sign an edict that for 30 days, any man who petitions any god or accepts you, the king would throw into the lion's den? The king answered, as a law of the Medes and Persians, the order stands and is irrevocable. Then they replied to the king, Daniel, one of the Judean exiles, has ignored you, the king, and the edict you signed, for he prays 3 times a day. And as soon as the king heard this, he was very displeased. He set himself on rescuing Daniel and made every effort until sundown to deliver him. Then these 3 men went to the king and said to him, you, as the king, know it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no edict or ordinance the king established can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him to the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet ring of the nobles, so that nothing in regards to Daniel could be changed. Then the king went to the palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and he could not sleep. Now, what is amazing about this story here is, again, we see human behavior. How these men know that they were so bent on getting Daniel. Watch this. One, they could not see the future. And we'll get to that later. We also see the regret and the remorse, how the king saw how foolish he was, right? First of all, the law itself is foolish. That you would make a law that would so box you in. And at this case right now, and he knew, these guys set me up. They set me up with a law. And by the way, I can say a lot about our laws today. This is one group of people are so smart because they change laws, while other group of people, they get in their feelings. But this is why you see a lot of times people, they get busy writing laws. And sometimes these laws are so, they benefit. You have to look at when a law is established, who does it benefit? In this case right here, it benefited their hatred. Other laws that are passed benefit profit. I'm talking about in our case, it benefits profit. But in this case, it benefited their hatred. But like I say, they did not see ahead that they could have made a deal with the king that said, okay, king, we'll let you slide if you give us X amount of, it was almost, remember who was the girl? I can't, oh, one of the most famous stories, Oh, later on, John the Baptist. When John the Baptist, Herodias, uh, her daughter danced. She danced this seductive dance, and the king promised her whatever she wanted. And the one thing she wanted was the head of John the Baptist. They hated John the Baptist. John the Baptist spoke righteousness, and the one thing that she could have got a whole lot of stuff, but her hatred driven her just nonetheless giving the head. And you stop and think about it. What would she do with just a dead carcass head? Hatred. And so these men, same thing. These men were so driven by hate, they probably could have made a deal with the king, but no. So verse 19, it says, at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he reached the den, he cried out in anguish to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God. The king said, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke with the king. May the king live forever. I always get this picture that Daniel's kind of sitting back there, kind of like laying on the, using the lions like as a armor, right? Kind of kick back, chill, king. Yeah, it's all good, right? He said, Daniel spoke with the king. May the king live forever. My God has sent his angels to shut the lion's mouth. They haven't hurt me, for I was found innocent before him. Also, I have not committed a crime against you, my king. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to take Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den uninjured, for he trusted in his God. Then the king gave the command to throw, and then I'm sorry. The king then gave the command, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel was brought and thrown into the lion's den. Their children and their wives. See, remember, they did not think about beyond. See, the king has order. These kings have order right here. He says, and they have not reached the bottom of the den, for the lions overpower them and crushed all their bones. Now, the sad thing, of course, is their wives and their children had to suffer for them. Verse 25, then King Darius wrote to those of every people, nation, and language who lived in all the earth. Remember, these kingdoms rule the entire planet. Okay? May your prosperity abound. I issue a decree that in all my royal dominion, people must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. For he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And we will come to Cyrus, get to know him later. Okay? Very important person, that Cyrus. Now, what is kind of interesting here, I'm going to throw in just kind of a little thought here. This is what Christian nationalists would love to have. I'm just going to dip my toe in. That's all I'm going to say right here. The problem with Christian nationalists, because besides their idiotic beliefs that the church is going to set up this kind of kingdom, remember God was already using these kingdoms, and God established Daniel as a true prophet. And the blessing of something like this is that you also see how God, the knowledge of the glory of God spread through the world at this time. Think about that. The knowledge of the glory of God spread through this world during this time. And you have a person like Daniel who was able to reach the king. Then the king now is saying, hey, everybody must fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. Now, that said, that is not the mission that Christian nationalists, that's not what God is doing. Christian nationalists wish they could do it, but It's just not. Sorry, guys. But anyway, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I'll see you in the next study.